I first read The Story of Edgar Sawtelle when it came out in 2008, and it was everything that I love in a book. There was scope, there was familial drama, there was the whole Hamlet retelling in northern Wisconsin, which is very close to where I grew up. So the setting just resonated. And not only did you have the scope, but you had some genuinely beautiful writing. There is this one chapter in this book told from the dog Almondine's perspective that I still talk about to this day, probably more than I should, probably more than is healthy. It's on my list of favorite books ever. And I was really excited when I found out that there was going to be a prequel. That just came out. Familiaris is the prequel. But if we thought the story of Edgar Sawtelle was long at over 550 pages, Familiaris is not a book that one reads casually. One does not simply read Familiaris. It dominates your reading life. At 975 pages, you have to build your schedule around this book. And so now that it is December 23rd, and my grades are in, my presents are wrapped, and I feel like I have some free time, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I am going to tackle Familiaris over the course of my winter break and see how it turns out. If Story of Edgar Sawtelle is one of my favorite books, I'm really hopeful for Familiaris. But as a prequel, I've got some worries because there's a chance that it might not hold up as well, and I'd rather not be disappointed. But nothing risked, nothing gained. So in this vlog, I am going to be working my way through Familiaris to see how it plays out. When you read a hardback, dust jacket or no dust jacket? I'm a no dust jacket kind of person. Like, this just feels so much better to travel with, to me. So anyway, all right. In the morning, we're starting. Super excited. I woke up the next morning ready to dive in, but first, coffee. Because let's be honest, nothing good is going to happen without some of that sweet, sweet bean juice in my system. And this morning was one of those perfect ones. Christmas tree twinkling, coffee in hand. It felt like the calm before the chaos of holiday travel. And with no distractions, aside from Rhoda deciding she wanted in, I finally started. Wroblewski does such a nice job of dropping us into John Sawtelle's life, making you instantly curious about his character and where his stories will go. I loved my time with that book on that particular morning. It was such a peaceful way to start the day, but eventually I had to put it down because we needed to get ready to head out on the trip. From there, it was all about packing. Clothes, supplies for the dogs, and getting the house ready for friends who were going to watch it while I was gone. It's always a bit chaotic, but I really appreciated having the audiobook of Familiaris as an option. Switching between the physical book and the audiobook in this instance made the process so much more enjoyable. And honestly, it felt essential for a trip like this. Once the car was packed up, luggage, dogs, and all, we were finally ready to hit the road. Now, I will admit, I am a messy packer, but it all came together in the end, and with Familiaris queued up and the dogs in the back seat, we were off on our holiday adventure. We're late, but we're getting on the road. And we don't actually have to be anywhere at any particular time today, so that's good. Because that's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Our target tonight is Iowa City. I've got a hotel there. The thing about an EV that I was not prepared for is how much longer road trips take. Because the charging and the speed and all of that. But it's fine. Totally fine. So let's catch up on where I'm at in Familiaris. I've got to say, I am probably on page, 160 something right now. One of the things that I loved about the story of Edgar Sawtelle is how he creates this story within story within story. Like, all of the characters have a backstory, and he has this really great ability to figure out like how much story to give you and how much to hold off on. And it's just ridiculously smart. It reminds me a lot of Wendell Berry's, I believe they're Port Jefferson books. Don't quote me on either of those things, but Hannah Coulter is part of that overall series, and I love the feel of like you get to know these characters really, really well, and he's done such a nice job of it. The characters have such great voices in this book. There's this one chapter between John Sawtelle and his friend Elbow. They've managed to purchase a farm. It's the farm in Edgar Sawtelle. And he's trying to convince Elbow to move with them. And the witty repartee between the two is just so good. So good. So yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. I was a little worried about constraint. Not worrying about that right now. He seems to be doing good. So I'm going to probably listen to some more while I'm driving, and we'll check in when I get into Iowa City and have a chance to debrief. But so far, so good, and we're making progress. We've got dog back there, dog over here. We're ready to go. All right. While I did forget to check in when I got to the hotel, I did have 3 charging stops on the way, which means I got some fairly good reading time in. So, it's a travel vlog, so costume changes, minimal. Also, have made some progress. I'm probably, a fourth of the way through, quarter of the way through. He's organized this book into parts. We've left the Sawtelles buying the farm, and they've gotten to Popcorn Corners. Now we're switching to the story of Walter, the local grocer, and his daughter, which has been an interesting chapter. It deals with the Peshtigo fire, which I grew up just north of Peshtigo, like maybe an hour or so. I'm blown away at how he describes the fire itself. Beautiful writing. The way that he talks about the funnel of fire not only going up into the sky, but like drilling into the ground is kind of amazing. Also, this particular charging station, very full. Very full. Like every stall is full. While charging the car, I managed to get a little more reading done, and before I knew it, the battery, it was full. Phyllis was more than content in the passenger seat, and Rhoda was sitting in the back, chilling out, perfectly content. We made a quick additional stop in Rockford to charge before we headed to Milwaukee, which was a highlight because I got to spend some time with my dear friend Candance. She is just my people. We had a great walk. We ate some great food. We had a late night talk about life, who we are, who we hope to become. Candance also seemed to be open to restarting her YouTube channel. I'm manifesting that for her right here. But spending time with her always leaves me feel grounded, and I love when I have the chance to see her in person in her space. And with that, the dogs and I hunkered down to bed because the next day was going to be the Illinois Tollway, which, note to self, I need to pay those tolls. Surprisingly, Chicago traffic wasn't too bad, though by the time we got to Michigan City, it was gray and rainy. Not great charging weather. However, during my second to last stop in Michigan for charging, I got to spend some time editing some YouTube videos instead of reading, because let's be honest, that's life now. Once I hit Battle Creek, I made a stop at Horrocks, a grocery store I absolutely loved when I was an undergrad. It was a real sense of nostalgia, but truly I was there for the Traverse City Cherry Coffee. And unfortunately, they were completely sold out of the bulk, which was super disappointing. So I had to settle for the prepackaged version. And while it's not quite the same, I'll take what I can get, because life, it does start with the coffee. It's amazing. It's amazing. That store is amazing. It just has ridiculously fresh produce and flowers and interesting stuff, and I miss it. I miss it a lot. It's probably, like, people aside, one of the top 10 things I miss when I think about Michigan. So, Horrocks, if you're in Battle Creek or Lansing area, definitely go. Our last charging stop was just a stone throws away from Clara's house, but apparently I don't know my own strength and almost broke the charging station. But this stop marked the home stretch, and no one was happier than the dogs. Phyllis and Rhoda absolutely love Clara's pups, and honestly, I think they'd be happy to stay here forever. We have spent almost every New Year's Eve at Clara's for nearly 2 decades, minus the COVID year, and it's always so lovely to be here. There's warmth, it wasn't raining anymore, and the Holly Jolly could officially begin. For us, Holly Jolly looks like a lot of games of Sequence, and this year I kind of actually held my own for once. Usually, Clara dominates at this game and I don't win a single round, but this year I kind of managed to actually put up a fight. I think I won an entire set of games. We also went to our favorite yarn store, which was a super treat. I didn't get a lot of reading done here, but I did sneak in some time with Familiaris, because this was supposed to be a reading vlog, right? That said, I always prioritize spending time with my friends when I can. We did have moments where we read together, across the table from each other, but I didn't film any of that. So here's some proof that I actually read. Also, this Michigan weather. So disappointing. I was hoping for snow, but Michigan wasn't delivering this year. We got a few flurries, but nothing substantial. Boo. Boo, I say. Phyllis, on the other hand, was completely content. We also played a new game called Abducktion, which was ridiculously fun, and I feel like it's going to become a game we keep in regular rotation. I may need to buy one of my own. But I wanted to touch in with Familiaris because it has been a couple of days and I'm making progress, as you can see. I am at about 400 pages in. There was a section of the book that I slowed down on. Part 2 was Look Ahead Girl, and Look Ahead Girl introduced some mythology / fantasy elements that kind of felt like they came out of nowhere, but also didn't. It slowed me down because I was like, is this happening? What is going on here? I'm a bit confused. But it did work out. It did work out. I'm back on board. It just took me out of, when I think about the story of Edgar Sawtelle, yes, it's Hamlet, so you've got the ghost, right? But it's not that kind of fantasy. And so I wasn't expecting that mythological element to come in. And I don't even know if it's mythological yet. We're still trying to figure that out at this point in the book. And so I'm interested in how it's all going to tie together. I'm loving the relationship between Mary and John, who are the grandparents, and kind of this found family that they're bringing together on this farmhouse at Relax a Lot, and how, you know, Walter the grocer and Ida, his child, is coming into it. So I'm enjoying it so far. I'm past, I think, one of my stickier parts. I hope he lands this like fantasy element. Still moving forward. January 2nd, we're on page 400, making good progress. There was a night when everyone was out, so I took the opportunity to catch up on some editing and plan for my YouTube 2025 goals. It felt good to have some time to focus, knowing the next night we would be bowling. I used to think I was decent at bowling, but turns out I am not. Maybe I never was. Either way, it was a lot of fun, and honestly, it was just about enjoying the time together. The next morning, the dogs had some time to play around, which was great because we had to start packing the car. It's always a bittersweet moment for me. On one hand, I look forward to getting back to my life because I've built a life I really enjoy. But on the other hand, leaving behind people who mean so much to me is hard. These are the people who make trips like this so worthwhile, and I try to hold on to that gratitude as I hit the road. We stopped for some charging in Kalamazoo and continued through Michigan, with Familiaris playing, but I'll admit, I wasn't into part 4 with Gar and Claude's storylines, so I wasn't as engaged. I decided to take a little bit of a break and turned to something else. One more quick charge and we were on our way to Chicago to stop at the Frugal Muse bookstore, which was a delight, before we charged again in Joliet and got to our hotel, which is where the dogs reminded me why we can't have nice things. They were in full chaos mode. But the next day we hit the road again, heading to Omaha. The drive was cold, really cold, but definitely manageable. The Midwest isn't exactly known for stunning winter landscapes, but there's still something really beautiful about those open stretches of road. With a couple more charging stops along the way, I found myself fully immersed in The Bright Sword, Lev Grossman's book, though it apparently put Phyllis to sleep. And just like that, we've hit our last charging stop. So I left, and it was raining, and now I'm back, and it's frigid. Oh my gosh, so cold. Here's where I'm at with Familiaris. We've had a time jump, so we went from the Peshtigo fire and Walter's story into more of Relax a Lot and the farm. And I'm still processing some of my thoughts, because then we move into the next book, which jumps ahead 25 years. And I'm gonna have some thoughts on this, I'm sure. But I am gonna finish it when I get back to Lincoln. Have been doing some reading, have been doing some listening, but it's not done yet. I'm about probably 75% of the way through. But overly enjoyable. I think, maybe, hold off on that. Hold off, actually. Confession time. It is January 10th, and I have not picked up Familiaris since I got back on the 4th. And part of that is I am just not into this current part of the book. I need to finish it because I'm back on contract on the 13th. So to get myself back into it, I'm going to pick up with the audiobook, and in hopes of getting some excitement figured out around getting started with the book again. And because it's the 10th, I need to deal with that monstrosity right there. I need to take down the crispy tree because it is truly crispy, and the earliest I could get it picked up, we have a local community organization that picks up Christmas trees and takes them to the mulcher, was the 11th. All the other dates I was gone for. So it's the 10th. I need to get this done. I need to get it out on the curb and just in general get Christmas taken down. Though those on the mantle are going to stay. The trees are going to stay. I need some kind of twinkly, but I'm going to put in my headphones and get started, but wanted to be honest about the fact that I've been slacking. So let's get this done. Let's get some listening in and let's get some cleaning in. It'll be great. The section of the book titled Seeker, Consoler, Challenger, Defender, Betrayer was not my favorite. I'll share more about why in the wrap-up, but I found myself having to push through it. It took me out of the story, and it was a bit of a slog to get through. But that said, once I made it past that part, the book completely pulled me back in. I was able to reconnect with characters, which was a relief. It reminded me why I loved the first book so much in the first place. Meanwhile, I was taking down the Christmas tree and feeling a little melancholy about it. Does anyone else get that way when the holiday decorations come down? There's something about a twinkly Christmas tree that just feels magical at Christmas time. I know I could keep the twinkly lights up all year, but would they feel as special? Also, I think next year I'm going to be team multicolored lights. The day after the holiday cleanup, I finally worked my way through the end of Familiaris, and wow, I plowed through these last two parts in the epilogue, and I will admit, I totally cried. There were moments in this book, especially toward the end, that were just incredibly powerful. It delves into life, into grief, love, and everything in between. It just was heartbreaking and beautiful. I took a day to gather my thoughts about all 975 pages and got ready for my overall thoughts on a book that has been both a literal as well as a figurative journey. So I began reading Familiaris on December 24th, 2024, and finished it on January 18th, 2025. A testament both to the book's immense length, 975 pages, and the way it draws you in. This is a novel that's going to require patience and commitment from readers, but for those readers who love sprawling storylines, richly developed characters, and a sense of history, it's definitely a rewarding experience. David Wroblewski's long-awaited prequel to the Story of Edgar Sawtelle tells the story of John and Mary Sawtelle, grandparents of Edgar, and spans decades. The novel is divided into distinct sections. The prologue, Another Carnival of the Same Gods, Look Ahead Girl, Relax a Lot, Consoler, Challenger, Defender, Betrayer, An Agitation of the Heart, and the titular Familiaris, followed by an epilogue. Each section is its own self-contained arc, almost like a collection of novellas, with stories nestled within stories. This structure is ambitious and often compelling, though not without its challenges. One of Wroblewski's greatest strengths as a writer is his ability to layer narrative. He has this remarkable knack for nesting stories within stories, drawing you deeper and deeper into the lives of his characters. And most of the time, those connections are seamless. Occasionally, though, they falter, leaving certain threads feeling a bit too loosely tied. But when it works, and to be really honest, it often does, the result is captivating. His language is lush without being overbearing, creating a vivid sense of place that perfectly suits the novel's focus on the interplay between humans and animals, people and nature. And let's be honest, nobody writes the bond between humans and animals quite like David does. The story of John and Mary Sawtelle is the beating heart of Familiaris. These two characters absolutely pulled me in. John with his relentless, sometimes maddeningly so, drive for innovation, and Mary with her sharp pragmatism and quiet strength make for a fascinating pair. John is the dreamer, the one who always sees how things could be better, even when his ideas verge on the impossible. Mary, by contrast, is grounded and practical, a woman who knows how to take those grand ideas and turn them into something real. Their dynamic is magnetic, and their partnership is one of the most compelling aspects of the book. John feels more fully realized earlier in the novel, with his quirks and his flaws on full display. His obsession with efficiency and improvement, while admirable, often makes him frustratingly blind to the immediate needs of those around him. Yet it's precisely this obsession that drives much of the story, from his attempts to revolutionize dog breeding to his unyielding commitment to building something meaningful. But Mary's arc, I loved it. At first, she seems like a quieter presence, someone somewhat in the background of John's larger-than-life ideas. But Wroblewski does the work to bring her to life, peeling back the layers to reveal a woman of immense strength, intelligence, and resilience. Her pragmatism isn't just a counterbalance to John's dreaming. It's a force of its own, one that shapes their shared life and gives the novel its emotional anchor. By the end, Mary emerges as one of the most fully realized and deeply compelling characters in the entire book. Of course, no story about John and Mary would be complete without the supporting cast, and Familiaris delivers a host of memorable characters who enrich the world of the Sawtelles. There's Frank, the maimed and deeply bitter World War I veteran who becomes a surprising source of inspiration and growth. When we first meet him, he's really incredibly hard to like. He's got these massive sharp edges and self-destructive tendencies that make him feel more like a liability than an asset. But as the story unfolds, Wroblewski slowly reveals the depth of his character. And by the end, I was rooting for him. I was invested in his journey as much as I was in John and Mary's. And then there's Elbow, who may be my favorite character, whose calm and steady carpentry skills provide a much-needed foil to John's boundless energy. Where John is impulsive and often reckless in his pursuit of improvement, Elbow is methodical and thoughtful. His quiet wisdom and unassuming demeanor make him one of the most endearing characters in the book. Sojak, the logger-turned-horse thief, and his magnificent horse, Granddaddy, who, I want that book. That should be a book on its own. Sojak is brash, resourceful, and endlessly entertaining, but it's Granddaddy who steals the show. Like I said, he needs a book. He's got this uncanny intelligence and undeniable charm that becomes an integral part of the story and a symbol of the bond between humans and animals that lies at the heart of the Sawtelle legacy. What's remarkable about this ensemble is how real they feel. Each character has their own quirks, their motivations, their arcs, making them more than just background players in John and Mary's story. They are friends, they are foils, they are catalysts, shaping the Sawtelle's journey in ways that are both subtle and ultimately delightful. At the center of all of these relationships is the interplay between humans and animals, a theme that Wroblewski explores with a sensitivity and depth that few authors can really match. The Sawtelles' work with dogs isn't just a backdrop, it's a driving force in the novel, a lens through which we see their values, their hopes, their dreams. The animals in this story aren't just pets or working creatures. They are companions, they are partners, and reflections of the humans who care for them. This bond is particularly evident in the way that John and Mary approach their breeding program. Their goal isn't really to create a specific breed or achieve a particular aesthetic. It's to cultivate dogs who understand and connect with humans on a profoundly deep level. It's a labor of love, one that mirrors the relationships they build with the people around them. Ultimately, the heart of Familiaris lies in the relationships between John and Mary, between them and their friends, and between all of them and the animals who share their lives. These connections, with all their joys and challenges, give the novel its emotional depth and make it a story worth returning to time and time again. One element of Familiaris I'm still grappling with is its mysticism. While Edgar Sawtelle had its share of fantastic moments, like the water spouts scene that changes Edgar's trajectory, the magical realism in Familiaris felt more explicit and less seamlessly integrated. Ida Payne, introduced in Edgar Sawtelle as the proprietor of Popcorn Corner Grocery Store, gets an expanded backstory here. Her father, Walter, finds her during the Peshtigo fire in the section titled Look Ahead Girl. And this event bestows her with powers that play a pretty significant role throughout the novel. While Ida's abilities created some really beautiful moments, they often felt like convenient plot devices. Too often, her powers solved problems in ways that undermined the ingenuity and determination of the other characters. What stood out, however, was the contrast between the mystical and the deeply human theme of achieving the impossible, partially through sheer effort. John's repeated question, "Suppose you could do one impossible thing," runs throughout this novel, and the most compelling moments are the ones where characters rely on their own ingenuity, determination, and relationships to make those impossible things happen. But then there's that section. You know the one. I'm looking at you, searcher, consoler, challenger, defender, betrayer. I'm looking at you. This part of the novel drops us into a time jump with John and Mary's sons, Claude and Gar, of the Story of Edgar Sawtelle fame, suddenly thrust into the spotlight. And here's the thing, it just didn't work for me. And one of the reasons this section feels so out of sync is we've spent hundreds of pages immersed in the lives of John, Mary, and their circle. Characters we know intimately with their quirks, their motivations, and relationships richly detailed. In stark contrast, however, Claude and Gar are painted with the broadest brushstrokes, rather than the fine detail that David does so well elsewhere. This lack of depth is particularly frustrating with Gar, who might be the most underdeveloped character across both Familiaris and the Story of Edgar Sawtelle. He had so much potential. His backstory, his personality, and his journey could have really added significant weight to this section. Instead, we barely get to know him before the narrative shifts its focus, shortchanging what could have been a truly compelling arc. Rather, this section leans heavily on Claude's villainous origins, tracing the roots of the character we meet in Edgar Sawtelle. While this aspect of the story provides context, it doesn't carry the same emotional resonance as the rest of the novel. It's a shame because the potential was there for something deeper, something that would have tied Claude and Gar more meaningfully into the rich tapestry of the Sawtelle legacy. Ultimately, this part of the book felt more like a missed opportunity than a fully realized chapter in the story. And then there's the final section, Familiaris. Told entirely through letters from one character to another, no spoilers, it's a sharp departure from the rest of the book in both tone and structure, but it works beautifully. After the expansive, layered storytelling of the previous sections, this shift to the immediacy and intimacy of personal correspondence feels like an exhale, a moment of reflection that's both poignant and profound. What makes this section so powerful is the singularity of voice. All the letters come from one character writing to another, creating a direct and deeply personal connection between sender and recipient, and by extension, the reader. The letter writer's voice is raw, unfiltered, immediate, giving us a deeper understanding of their thoughts and their emotions. It's an act of trust, a laying bare of vulnerability that invites the reader into their most private moments. The letters also serve to bring the novel's themes into sharp focus, and after nearly 1,000 pages of sprawling narrative, this section distills the story's emotional core into a series of deeply moving reflections on connection, loss, and resilience. Through these letters, we see how relationships, whether between humans, animals, or even with ourselves, define who we are and how we navigate the world. What struck me most was how the letter writer's perspective illuminated so much about the relationships in the novel. The letters reflect on what was said, what was left unsaid, and what could never be fully articulated. It's a testament to Wroblewski's skill that this section feels deeply intimate, yet universally resonant. There's also a sense of closure here that feels well-earned. While the rest of the book is told through third-person narration, the letters bring us into the heart of one character in a way that feels raw and deeply personal. The epistolary format offers a final opportunity to witness their voice in its purest form, and the results are devastatingly beautiful. I cried. The letters, they tugged at something deep, balancing heartbreak and hope in a way that left me both wrecked and grateful. This section alone justifies the time and emotional investment required to read Familiaris. The choice to limit this section to a single character's voice, bold but effective, because it creates this sharp contrast with the layered, omniscient perspective of the rest of the novel, bringing the narrative to a deeply personal conclusion. It also reminds us that sometimes the most powerful moments in life come not from grand gestures, but from the quiet, honest sharing of one soul to another. For me, the letters were not just the most affecting part of the book. They were the moment when the entire story came into sharp, heartbreaking clarity. They tied together threads of the narrative while leaving just enough space for readers to reflect on their own connections and losses. Despite its flaws, Familiaris is a stunning achievement. It's a novel that dares to be big, that doesn't shy away from complexity, and that asks its readers to commit. You got to commit to the characters, to the history, to the dogs, and for the most part, that commitment pays off. Yes, there are moments where the narrative stumbles, but there are also moments of such beauty and depth that I was happy to forgive the missteps. So, would I recommend it? Absolutely. But with a caveat. This is a book that demands time and patience, and it may not work for every reader. But if you're willing to dive in, Familiaris will reward you with a rich, sprawling story that stays with you long after you've turned the final page. And with that, that's a wrap on this vlog. Join me on Tuesday for the Books About Books tag. And as always, I appreciate you. And I hope life is good. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.